Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in. Again, I am Kaylee Batesman, the Managing Director, Community and Partnerships at SheCanCode, and today we are discussing overcoming imposter syndrome. I've got the incredible Amanda Witcher, UK and Ireland Director of Technology at Hays with me today, who is here to explore some fresh perspectives on how to overcome feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt in the tech sector. Welcome, Amanda. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kaylee, and thank you for having me today. I'm
It is
delighted
a
to be
pleasure.
here in a subject I'm very much passionate about.
Oh my gosh, I'm so pleased that you wanted to come on and talk about this subject because it is something that our community talk about a lot. So we have a lot to unpack today around this topic. So it's a pleasure to have you here. But can we start with a bit of background about you to set the scene?
Yeah, perfect. So as you say, I'm UK and Ireland Director for Technology Business at Hays, and I've been here for 17 years, which I'm not quite
Wow,
sure. I know it seems to have
they're
flown
doing
by.
something
Um,
right.
and my career has definitely evolved over the last 17 years. And obviously being on the other side of tech, so obviously the work that we do is very much supporting organizations to really attract tech talent across a lot of different organizations, and over time, as I say, my role has grown but very much mirrored actually what a typical female in technology may have experienced over the last sort of 17 years. I started my career and was surrounded by men, both in the workplace but also from the clients I was supporting. They were all men, and really I've seen the evolution of the female representation across the industry over the last sort of 17 years. But equally, I'm really passionate and always have been really passionate around diversity, equity, and inclusion, which obviously has gone through lots of different acronyms over the last 17 years as well. But for me, I'm really passionate around how we can support. So not just about attracting female and women into the industry, but actually how can we really support them on their journey throughout their sort of career. And over the last sort of 18 months, we've actually set up our Women in Tech Connect program, which is now across 10 different locations in the UK and is ever spreading, which is positive to see. But really, it's about creating those communities and how we can support and challenge ourselves to do something different, and to maybe challenge some of the barriers that we face as well. And I think imposter syndrome is one of those things that definitely is felt by a lot of not just women, as we will explore today.
Yes, yes, I completely agree with that. And you're so right, actually, when you look back at the shows like 17 years ago, even the conferences and the exhibitions, I noticed a change only recently. And those kind of shows, I mean, I used to cover things like data centers and like really technical subjects. So they don't, there'd be a lot of guys at those conferences, obviously. But I noticed over time they really started to change, and suddenly there'd be a queue at the ladies' toilets, and you'd be
Yeah,
like, wow, I can chat to ladies in the queue at the toilets. Whereas years ago, you couldn't do that. There'd be just absolutely no one around.
yeah, it's
It's
100% is the case, and I think that
mm,
representation has definitely improved over time. But equally, if you look at it, actually, quite often you still see a sea of men and a handful of women. But I think there's definitely been some positive changes, and I agree, really, over the last couple of years, probably more so than ever.
yeah, definitely. And as you said, we've got so much to cover today because imposter syndrome is felt by a lot of people, male and female. It's something that our community talk about a lot. And sometimes it's a relief that other people are all feeling the same way that you're feeling. But to start with that today, how do you personally define imposter syndrome? And when did you first recognize it in yourself or others?
Oh, that's a biggie to start with, isn't it?
Nice
I think
loaded
it's
question.
I know. I think it's a really interesting one because I think when we look at imposter syndrome, it immediately has a negative narrative. I think just by the very wording of it. And I think, that's one of the things actually that I think we probably over time need to try and look at. How do we identify imposter syndrome? How do we articulate it? For me, imposter syndrome isn't all negative. But quite often I think it is the negative internal stories that maybe we give ourselves, that really I guess is the definition for me personally. I think it's where we feel a lack of self-belief and potentially fear, that maybe we don't have the expertise or the ability, not just in the workplace. I think equally a lot of mums, first-time mums, face imposter syndrome, don't know how to be a mum. So I think, you know, it goes beyond the workplace. But I do feel that, you know, it's the negative internal stories that we give ourselves and how they're sort of interlinked. Equally, I do think that it's not all negative. And actually, for me, you know, I learn, you know, from every sort of Women in Tech Connect event that we do, and all the amazing females that we bring together, and the stories that they share and the different perspectives that they give. Actually, my view over the last 12 months of imposter syndrome for me personally is that actually I'm using it as a way to challenge myself. So I come out of meetings and I think, oh, could I have done that better? Or, oh, I don't think I'm doing quite what I need to be doing. And then, but actually, rather than seeing it as that negative, I'm seeing it as, okay, well, what can I do better and how can I improve? And I think it's important in any, you know, in anything in life where there's a negative, we try and look at that to challenge ourselves and look at things differently. And I think getting those perspectives from others are really important. But I think the perception of imposter syndrome itself is negative. That's the first part of the question. I haven't even got to the second part, have I yet? How do I recognize it in myself and drive myself forward? I think I catch myself quite often. I know the role that I'm doing today, you know, I'm the first female at Hays doing the role that I'm doing, managing all of our technology business. I definitely, you know, went through my mind, I don't think I can do this job. I'm not sure that I've got the skills to do this. But what I've learned over time is that actually I have more skills than I realized, but it's only through challenging myself that I've been able to push forward and learn and develop. And I think often we look at others and think that they have all of the experience and skills. Most people in life are winging it in some degree. And it's just getting comfortable with understanding that I don't have it all. I'm on a journey and I'm continuing to learn. And for me, that's what makes me a better leader, a better person, and better at the job that I do.
I love that. Because that's one of those things that I wish somebody had told me when I started work, that everybody is winging it in some way. There is a fine balance because you can't wing it to the point where you really don't know what you're doing. But after you've been in work a little while, you just notice that some people are better at covering the fact that they're not quite sure, but they're going to go off and find out. And that's a kind of, there is a balance because you're so right with challenging yourself, because imposter syndrome isn't that, like you said, that negative internal voice where you're like, I can't do this, I shouldn't be here. Sometimes it is there to protect you as well, to just think, yes, I could push myself and challenge myself, but sometimes it's also good to listen to that voice and think, actually, maybe this isn't the place for me, and maybe I can't do this, and maybe I should try something else and challenge myself in a different direction. So it is always seen as that negative voice that's always like, you can't do this, but sometimes you should just listen and think, actually, I could challenge myself, or I could try a different direction, or and that all of that is just fine, and it's not negative saying that you shouldn't be here. It's just, you know, maybe listen to your needs a little bit more. And the more that you've been in work, the more you realize, actually, I can move around and I can learn new things or fall into the right company that does develop me in the way that I'd like to. But you're right, it is always seen as a very negative voice. It is always saying to you, you know, people are going to find out, everybody's going to find out, you can't do this.
And it's interesting because one of the females at our recent event says, you know, is it imposter syndrome? Is it that we're seeking perfection? Because as females, we
Yes.
tend to always want to do things well and do a good job. And so sometimes, you know, that's where that negative narrative comes in, where we don't feel that we've necessarily done a good job or we've not done it to the best of our capability. But life isn't perfect, and humans aren't perfect. And so I think rather than seeking perfection, as you say, it's more about what can you learn, but being more in tune with yourself and what yourself is saying, and how do you cut through some of that negative noise as well, which I think is really important for everyone.
Because it's different for everyone. Like you said, some people look like they find everything absolutely easy and a breeze, and they might not, they're just covering a bit better. But also, that doesn't mean that that particular person's journey is suited for you either. And like you just said there, there's always that perfection. You have to be, you have to look at the executives and the CEOs and think that's what I'm meant to be doing. And actually, that's not true. And you might be thinking, I feel like an imposter in this really senior role. And it's probably because you felt pushed into that role and it was something that you didn't even want to do, but you just went for perfection. And actually, it might not have been suited for you anyway. So yeah, like you said, just listening to yourself sometimes and being more in tune with what you would like to do. I'm curious about your experience growing up as well, as in terms of like, what was that like at school? Do we pick some of those negative feelings up before we've even entered the workplace about technology and kind of what we think it's going to be like if we study it at school? Is it a negative experience? Like, what was yours like?
Yeah, really interesting. I've never really thought about it like that, but I think, I think as humans, we all know, babies enter this world as, I guess, as pure, and they're really shaped by everything that is around them. And I think, yeah, definitely for me, I mean, I was really fortunate in terms of, my mum always worked throughout my sort of childhood, and really strong female and a leader in the work that she did, not in technology. But actually, I think I had that role model from an early age of someone who always believed that no matter what I did I was going to be successful. School was really mixed for me. I was never, the highest achiever, but I worked hard, and I always sort of got through. And technology, interestingly, wasn't really something that I was necessarily fascinated by. Equally, I think it was very different. So, when I was sort of growing up in, I won't say my age, but in the late 80s, early 90s at school, technology, we had floppy disks at that point in time. So we didn't have the technology, we had pagers, and, the first iteration of the Nokia mobile came out. So I think, a lot of people, I guess, have grown up in a similar era, which I think is very different to today. But I think our understanding of technology today is very much more advanced at a younger age than what I sort of experienced, and I just fell into it. I don't even really know how. Going back 17 years, it just sort of seemed to happen. But one of the things that I did find is that I absolutely loved it and was fascinated by it. I love the pace of change. I definitely like to be in challenging situations, and obviously trying to understand and learn technology is so vast and is continuing to evolve. And I think that's one of the things that's really kept me doing what I do today is the passion for technology and how that's sort of evolving.
Yes, definitely. You sound like so many of our community members that are like, I don't know how I ended up in tech, but here I am. And you're staying. That's the main thing, that people fall in. They don't know how they get in, but they fall into the right company as well, where they feel like they can keep progressing and growing. And that's the great thing about being in technology, that it's constantly changing. Um, I wanted to talk to you about some of your research that has been happening at Hays, exploring imposter syndrome in the tech sector. What were some of the most surprising or concerning findings from that research?
I think it's a combination. So the research has come out of our employment trends spring update report, which is part of our salary and market insights guide that we produce every year. But because of some of the changes that have happened, we did a bit of a spring update this year. I think, firstly, how vast imposter syndrome is. But actually, the variation between men and women isn't as big as we thought. That definitely was one of the things that sort of surprised me. So our research showed that 68% of female tech professionals have faced imposter syndrome at some stage in their career, and men 61%. So actually,
Oh,
going
okay.
to the point that you made earlier, some people are better at covering it up than others. And I
Yes.
think women possibly don't mask some of that stuff as well as others, or don't wing it as well as maybe our sort of male counterparts. But equally, more than a third, so about 36% of people working in tech said that imposter syndrome has increased as they've progressed their career. So as they've moved up that leadership ladder, actually they've felt that imposter syndrome probably creep in more and more over time, which again, I think alludes to the point that you were making earlier around, as people become more senior and potentially are exposed at different levels across an organization, where maybe we don't have the skills or we're not used to engaging at that sort of level, that's where imposter syndrome can definitely creep in. I also think for me, that one of the key issues that we have in technology. So again, actually, when we looked at imposter syndrome, it was more prevalent in technology than any other industry, which isn't surprising. I think one of the reasons for that is, and we had a really interesting session actually last week that I was running, is, we've come from a world where we had quite general tech skills, right, in terms of the roles and how people were structured across an organization. Whereas what we've moved to over the last sort of 5 years is much more specialization. So specialization within data, within cyber, and really going in deep into those specializations within those areas of technology. And I think there's this constant need that people feel that they have to have all of the technical skills to have the conversation, and they have to understand every element of it. But if you went to a CEO of an organization, they wouldn't understand every element of their organization and all of the workings that happen across all of their disparate teams across the organization. So I think, it's how we start to shift in, our own narrative in terms of understanding we don't need to know it all. We don't need to have all of the technical skills to manage a cyber team. We don't have to have all the technical teams to manage an architecture team as we move up that sort of leadership chain. That's why we hire those experts, because they are the experts, and we can't be experts in everything. Everyone will tend to have one or two areas where maybe their expertise really sort of lies, and I think that's okay. And I think understanding that that's okay, for a lot of people, is one of the things that maybe they haven't quite got their head around. And I think that's one of the reasons why imposter syndrome creeps in as people move up that leadership chain.
Yes, definitely. And yes, I felt that way actually, but I've heard lots of other community members say to me when they moved into leadership for the first time, it was quite a lonely place as well, because you feel like you almost can't say that you're feeling that way, because everyone now, you've got the role, right? You've got the position, everybody thinks you know what you're doing, so you can't ask. And also that you know everything, because that's why you got the position. So, and after a while you realize that's just a load of rubbish, because you have brilliant people on your team who know all the ins and outs, like you just said, and you don't have to know all of those things. You just have to know the things that you need to know as the leader. But so many people go through that little moment where they start stepping into leadership roles where they're like, I'm expected to know absolutely everything, and I can't let on that I don't. And actually, you're not. It's just a
Yeah.
ridiculous thought.
And
That's what your team is for.
I think it's funny, isn't it? Because partly I think, what do we need leaders for? We don't need leaders to always give us the answers, but we need leaders to help others find those answers. And I think the emotional intelligence and empathy is what makes a great leader, not knowing the answers to everything.
Yeah.
Um, and actually working with their team to find those answers or to find those solutions. And I think that's one of the things that really maybe we haven't quite fully understood in terms of our own expectations of what a leader is, which is often shaped by the leaders that have come before us. So those people that we've worked for. And I think sometimes we feel the need to emulate others, and, the leader that was doing that role before was exactly like this. But ultimately, we're all individuals and we're all people. And the reason that you've been given that role is because of you, not because of you need to be X, Y, and Z type of leader. So I think, the more that we become confident in our own ability and that we are enough, that I always say that to people, that we are enough, you are enough. It doesn't matter who you are, at what level, you have a voice, your voice is important, and you are enough. And the reason that you're in the role is because of you, not because of the technical skills, because the technical skills, we know, only takes you so far. And actually, from other research that we've done recently, the soft skills and the ability to adapt to change, the ability to communicate internally, and actually have empathy and emotional intelligence are just as important as some of those technical skills as well.
Yes, definitely. And those technical skills, because I wanted to ask you a little bit about career progression and how imposter syndrome in tech, how it can impact career progression, but it can also affect just people coming into tech in the first place, because those technical skills, a lot of people, they tend to say, oh no, I don't have that, I haven't taken this boot camp, or I don't know where to start, or it's too overwhelming, and I'm meant to have all of these technical skills to go into this job. And actually, what a lot of companies are looking for is exactly what you just said, the soft skills. They're looking for people that are a sponge and are willing to train and learn new things, but they're also looking for people that can communicate and have all of those soft skills that you have to have within a team. But that stops people coming in and then also progressing as well, because they just think, I'm not techie, I can't work in tech. But it's not useful for women, I suppose, who come into tech and then might leave around mid-career level, is it? They kind of think, well, that's it. I've kind of got to mid-career. I might be off to go and have a family, for instance, or have other commitments. And then they might have that imposter syndrome feeling. They feel like I'm not overly technical, and then they exit. It's not
Yeah.
massively useful.
I think the interesting thing that sort of feeds into it is because tech is evolving at such rapid pace, um, that further cements some of those challenges, I think, for females, especially if they've got caring responsibilities, they have to take time out, or they've gone on maternity leave. That imposter syndrome definitely starts to bleed in, because the reality is that the technology and the technology stacks that exist in organizations may have completely transformed over that 12 months, and so therefore maybe they don't have the skills, or as much of those skills that align to before they had whatever the career break is that they've had. So I think it can. I think that's where technology differs to other industries and other
Yeah.
types of roles, because of the evolution that we're seeing. Um, but I think it goes back to the point, you don't need to have it all. But equally, I think it's really important to understand and appreciate the skills that you bring to an organization, and some of those are those soft skills. And I think being really clear in terms of what you do bring, that will renew your own confidence,
Yes.
rather than again focusing on the skills that maybe you don't have, and looking at how you can upskill if you have taken a career break, really to help sort of aid that journey. But equally, and we may go on to this in a bit more detail later, but I think it's really important that there's also a call to organisations as part of
Yeah.
this. If we don't create true inclusive environments where people feel that they have got the opportunity to speak openly about what they're feeling, we will never solve the challenges that we have in terms of having diversity across technology. Because as females specifically, we face so many things throughout our life that we have limited control over. So whether that is hormonal and menopause, whether that is caring responsibilities of our elders or children, going on maternity leave, all of those things do knock confidence of females. But where you have got an environment, or you've created an environment within an organization that allows people the freedom to express themselves, that express their concerns, their worries, without fear of repercussions or impacting people's views on their ability to do their job, we are creating another barrier for females. So I think it's a really important thing that we've got to take accountability of ourselves, and how do we overcome some of those negative inner critics or stories that we give ourselves. But equally, we need to work for organizations that understand us, that want to invest in us and want to support us on our journey, because we have a hard slog as females. We really do. You know, and the menopause, obviously there's a lot more being spoken about in terms of the menopause, but that really does knock a female's confidence. You know, their brain isn't working in the same way as maybe it was pre-menopause. So, you know, being able to express that and offload, I think is a massive thing to help build that confidence so that people can continue to progress their career.
Yes, definitely. And to have that environment where it's okay for you to say, I don't know in meetings, because, or I don't know, but I can go and find out for you, it's okay. And certain companies are very good at that. There is a balance between I don't know because I don't know my job, and also I don't know because we haven't covered that. So let's go off and find out the answer. There are some really good companies that can really strike that balance. I remember being at an American company that was very curious about everything. And that meant that the team were very curious. So we could say, I don't know, but let's go off and find out. As long as it doesn't cost us a load of money trying to find that out, let's just go off and give it a go. And they were very, they really encouraged the team to stay curious. And it's okay that you don't know as long as you go off and try something. And we do that at SheCanCode. We're very test. If it doesn't work, drop it, test something else. But it means that you get in that feeling of, it's okay that I don't know everything. So go off and try and find something, and then actually you find that as an employee as well, you go further because it's okay that you don't know everything, but you can go and find the answers to it. But you're right, having that safe space to say, I don't know, we haven't tried that. You know, technology moves very fast. Of course, we haven't tried that. AI, loads of people talking about AI. There's loads of people out there thinking, how do we use this? How are we going to do this? But it's okay to say, actually, we haven't used that yet. How are we going to use it? Instead of people in a meeting looking at you thinking, oh, you don't know. So you
Yeah,
didn't know this
you
yet?
know what's interesting? Obviously, you can't have any tech conversation these days without mentioning AI. But it's really interesting. I was having a conversation yesterday, and there's so much hype, and I think that's the other thing for technology. There's so much hype around different technologies and various other things. Take it with a pinch of salt, because
Mm,
the hype outweighs the reality of what's actually happening, you
yeah,
know, especially when we talk about AI. AI, we know, is going to be a transformative technology, but it's not transforming technology today, if I'm being honest, across most organizations. There's small incidents of it, but there's not these huge, we've become an AI-led technology organization. And, you know, fundamentally, because I think, you know, some of the hype around AI and, you know, the amount of jobs that are going to be lost, I think that's another thing that probably is also feeding imposter syndrome. And
yeah.
that reality again, isn't right. We've just done our contractor day rate research that we do every year, and one of the things we wanted to understand this year is in terms of what are people actually implementing in terms of AI, but equally what are the drivers behind it. And actually the largest proportion, 31% of people are implementing AI to improve productivity of their employees. So
Mhm.
again, you know, sometimes with these things, don't always listen to the hype that's in the media, because it's not always a true reflection of what's happening on the ground in SME organizations, which make up, you know, a pretty large population of
Yeah.
the technology industry today. Yes, those larger enterprise level organizations maybe, but mostly corporates, they're not as far forward as, you know, you would think. So again, don't let that sort of feed in that, you know, I must know about AI, because the reality is that most people across the organization don't.
Yes, and just people chucking in jargon around it, and then again you have that feeling of like, yes, there's a hype, and I don't know about it. I noticed that at conferences as well. I had an editor years ago who said to me, when you sit in the keynote, take it with a pinch of salt, because you'll have the keynote speaker who's running up and down the stage, sweating, talking about new things, new releases, everything is amazing, and everybody's clapping. And then you come out, and if you just speak to anyone on the show floor, walking around the exhibition, hey, were you in the keynote? Are you using that? Are you doing it? And normally they turn around and go, no, we've all had our budgets slashed. Do you think we're doing that? No, we're nowhere near it. So usually it's listening to those keynotes, but once you go and talk to the people that are using it in their IT departments, you're like, nope, No, there were
Yeah.
absolutely nowhere near it.
The other thing you just mentioned, which made me chuckle inside, is jargon. Quite often, people use jargon, complex words, because they actually don't know what they're talking about. So
Yes,
sometimes the receiver thinks, "Oh, wow, they've got all the
they
technical knowledge in it."
know.
But actually, the reality is they're just using buzzwords, and actually, it's covering up for the fact that they don't know everything. So again, I think with everything, you've got to sort of take things with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because actually, going to a point you made earlier, so you don't know what's going on inside someone else. So you think externally that they know it all, they've got it all down, they've got every angle sort of covered. I mean, people would probably look at me, across my business, and think that, but I really don't have it handled half of the time. And I'm, in the background trying to figure it all out. And so the reality of what we see isn't actually always what's happening internally of someone else. And I think as people, we look at others, and maybe we're seeking validation, but we look at others as a guide of how we should be,
Yeah.
but you
I,
never know someone else's internal critic.
no, you do not. And I've actually enjoyed discovering that around public speaking, because I always hated public speaking and I would always just run from anything that was to do with public speaking. And I've noticed, being at a company where I can't run from that, and we have to host events, and it is all really good fun, and I've grown to really enjoy that. I've also noticed that now I have to introduce other speakers onto the stage, and when I'm prepping them beforehand, the things that they say to me, I've started to realize everybody else is feeling exactly the same way, but they're covering it better than I could in the past. So I've had speakers say to me, I'm like, you're in the presentation, I'll introduce you, everything will be fine. And they'll go, brilliant. If I want to exit and I need an exit to get out of this because I'm not feeling like, I can't cope with what is happening, or I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, what is the exit strategy? And I've so many people have asked me that. If they want to exit their presentation halfway through, what is the plan? Can you step in? Can you just cut it short? Can you move to the next speaker? And I thought, how did I not realize that everybody else is thinking exactly the same thing as me? And I was thinking, what is my exit strategy? I need to get off the stage. Everyone was thinking it. So I've kind of really enjoyed that, and hearing that when you do step into that really scary thing that you thought was your internal voice was like, don't do it, you don't want to do it. And then other people were saying the same thing. You're like, actually, yeah, people were just covering it better than me. That was
I
it.
think sometimes it's externalizing your inner voice, right?
Yes.
If we don't externalize it and don't show vulnerability, we don't quite realize that everyone else is feeling the same things as us. So we feel quite often that we are alone with it. But actually, the reality is that those people that you look up to probably do face some of the similar things. So I think, again, a strategy to have a think about, what can you do, and how can you potentially help or impact yourself today, is go and have a chat with someone else about how you're feeling. And I think you'd be surprised at the outcome, whether that's a man or a female. Actually, they probably are feeling similar things.
Mm,
People just aren't perfect. We might see them as perfect, but they really aren't. And I think equally, it's about challenging yourself, because I remember on the public speaking front, I hadn't done it before. And my first experience was like getting on a stage in front of 200 people.
oh,
And I remember being, in the office floor and having to do like office sales days and bringing the team together, and my hands would be shaking like a leaf. And I stood on this stage and I was talking about a subject that, one, I'm really passionate about, but I also know no nerves whatsoever. As soon as I started talking, the nerves just went. And I realized, oh, wow, I can actually do public speaking. So I just had no idea. And had I not have pushed myself out of my comfort zone, I wouldn't have known that either. So I think,
mm.
again, how you push yourself out of your comfort zone, don't say you can't do something unless you've tried it.
Yes, exactly. It was the thought of it, the thought of, I can't step out there. And I like now being in a position where if somebody says to me, I'm going to have a moment and I want to exit, I like being in that position where I'm senior enough that I now lead the event, that I can step in and say, it's fine, like I'll take over. No one in the audience is going to know that you have exited early. Only I know, because I know what you were going to say. And I can step in because I know that awful feeling of, I gotta go. It's like flight or fight, like I gotta go, gotta go. And I think, it's fine, like go. I can step in now, it's fine. But it dawns on you what other people were feeling, and that feeling of I can't do it and just pushing through it. I wanted to ask you about that and strategies. Do you have other strategies to kind of think, how do I overcome imposter syndrome? Because sometimes it's not always just do it, you know. Just
Yeah, I
do
know
it,
it's
it's
easier said
fine.
than done, isn't it? Like with all of these things in life. I think is a bit of a reality check that sometimes imposter syndrome isn't actually a reflection of the reality.
Mm,
And sometimes, we are just being hard on ourselves because potentially we're seeking perfection. So I think, becoming aware of what you're thinking and feeling is really important. And I think externalizing that where you can, either with family or with other people at work, because sometimes we just need another perspective, right, to get that reality check. I think that's really, really important. And the more that we vocalize it, as an individual, the more those people around you will start vocalizing it. And the more that all of a sudden some of these things will start to wash away because we won't realize they're quite as big as we think they are. Secondly, I think focusing on what you are good at, what you have achieved. So let's just say you've been managing a project and you're implementing a system, you've implemented the system, it's not gone exactly as you wanted it to go, and there's been challenges along the way. But rather than focusing on the challenges and what you could have done, focus on the outcome and where you got to. I think is really important. Embrace your imperfection, because we're humans and we're not perfect. And we all make mistakes, and making
mm,
mistakes, frankly, is the only way that we learn in life. If we didn't make mistakes, then we wouldn't change, we wouldn't adapt, we wouldn't move forward. So I think that's really important. And I think, equally when it comes to it, I guess from a world of work perspective, if you are feeling really insecure around certain skills that you don't have, but you feel that you need, or maybe you're looking at moving up the sort of ladder, but you don't feel that you've got the skills, start looking at how you can upskill. So what are the strengths of the skills that you've got, and actually how can you start to upskill? How can you ask for more work internally to help aid your sort of development? Really putting yourself out there, I think, is really important. It's like everything in life, where the fear of doing something is far greater than the reality of actually doing it. And actually, once you overcome that fear, the reward is even greater. So try not to live in the fear, I guess, is what I'm saying, and challenge yourself to overcome it. And I think you'd be surprised at some of the outcomes that you may get as a consequence. And I think just being vulnerable, I think especially for females, and I know, I speak to people all the time, and some people say even when they work with other females, they feel like they're in competition, and actually they feel that they can't be vulnerable. But who can you be vulnerable with? Who do you trust in your organization? Because I think, again, what you'll find is through your vulnerability that, one, you start to upskill, but equally those around you don't see those vulnerabilities as a negative. They probably see it as a positive, and sometimes we just need that external affirmation, and that's okay as well. But you are enough. If there's
yes.
one thing someone should say to themselves on a daily basis, you are enough. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just brilliant advice to take a step back sometimes and remember that. Remember all the things you've done in the year and how far you came as a team, and the good and the bad things, and how you learnt from them. We have quite a lot of attendees to our hackathons who are not technical, and some of them work in technology, but they work on like product management teams, and they come along, or some of them work in marketing. They come along to our hackathons just to stretch themselves. They know that it's not going to be, you don't have to be highly techy, you don't have to know how to code. We have mentors there to help you. But just to hear some of the language about, how the tech teams work, and to understand a little bit more about the vocabulary of the teams that they interact with. And some just come along to push themselves for that reason, because they find themselves in meetings where they can't quite understand what's being spoken about and how things come together. It's not their job to understand all of that, but they just wanted to feel a bit more in the know. So they'd come along to our hackathons, work on a project for the day with complete strangers, and just kind of really go out of their comfort zones, and then present at the end of the day. And a lot of them didn't have the intention of becoming technical. They just wanted to feel a bit more comfortable in meetings when they hear people talking really, technical jargon. Which is a brilliant way to push yourself and do that. Again, with the, you don't have to know everything. You could just be a bit more comfortable with what people are talking about in their roles as well, and find an environment where you can do that.
Yeah,
Which,
it's
how do
interesting.
you,
Sorry.
no, I was going to say, sorry, how do you support colleagues that are feeling like that? Is the other thing, though. I mean, you can't
Um,
always step in and be like, is everything okay with you?
I know, and it's a difficult one, right? And there's so much that is talked about in the DE&I space, which obviously is really important. But I think for me, culture is not about HR or a DE&I team and what they're implementing. It's about the people on the ground. Um,
Mm,
and I think, being able to create an inclusive culture fundamentally is driven by every single person on the ground. It isn't built by someone in HR. And so, I think step one is you being open and talking, because I think that then helps. So I'm always very open. As an example, if I use myself, I'm really open about the challenges that I have with my child, because he actually got it, finally got his ADHD diagnosis on Sunday. On a Sunday, had to go
oh,
and get,
that's
yeah, for an
random.
ADHD assessment.
At
Um,
least you got it.
but I'm really open about talking about how we manage neurodiversity in our house, which obviously then allows other people that have got experiences around neurodiversity to then be able to have that open conversation that maybe they wouldn't typically do. So I think really sort of, leaders leading by example with some of that vulnerability, and sharing maybe some of the challenges that they faced, I think is really important. Creating communities, having mentor schemes. Mentoring and allyship is really, really important from an organization perspective. Looking at how you can support your employees through mentorship and reverse mentoring, I think equally is as important. And I know SheCanCode have a mentor scheme as well.
Yes.
But really exploring some of that, I think, is important. The other thing that I talk a lot about in terms of all of our women in tech events is allies in action. It's very easy to say you're an ally, but what are you actually doing as an ally? And what action are you taking to support that community, whatever that community is? And I think that's really important, that we have a much more proactive conversation across organisations around allyship, because I think that's one of the things that is missing across a lot of organisations. Um, Ultimately, it's about how we better support people, and enable them to bring them their whole selves to work, because that's what we should be able to do in the day and age that we live in. Celebrating successes. Let's not focus on what hasn't gone right. Let's focus on what we've achieved and what we've delivered. As you say, how often do we get to the end of the year and really review all of the big wins that we've done with our teams? Those sort of things. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you goes such a long way, and is the freest, easiest way to give someone a lift. And quite often we don't do that. And that might be thank you for being an amazing person. That might be thank you for putting a smile on my day today. All of those things, I think, actually are really important to people on a day-to-day basis. Just receiving that nod to say thank you, you've done a good job, I really appreciate you, because appreciation, I think, definitely feeds into the confidence of people. But we've just got to create more inclusive, safe environments.
Yes, where people want to stay. That's the thing, because I love everything you just said, especially about taking action. There are so many companies that we see that want to do the tick box, and they'll do the, oh, you know, we just want to put your logo on something and that's kind of it. Or they'll do like one IWD tweet, problem solved. And they think that solved absolutely everything for their culture. Whereas the companies that get it right are the ones that, when you do need to ask for, like, you need to say, I need to go on mat leave, or I need to take time off, or even asking, I'm going to take 2 weeks off on holiday. Is that okay? Without being made to feel guilty. Those companies that are actually like, go away, shut off, do what you need to do. Mat leave, no problem. Caring for sick family members, no problem. But the ones that it's a feeling that when you do need to ask for those things, that it's okay, it's without question, go and do what you need to do. And they're the ones like yourself where you stay 17 years, instead of companies that complain that they can't even attract the right women in tech, let alone retain them through to leadership roles. Because I hear that all the time, where some companies are like, yeah, but how do we actually do that? And how do you actually help in doing that? And it's like, well, obviously we help in lots of those things, but it's also your job as a company to create that culture through lots of different initiatives. SheCanCode can help in one way, and then obviously partnering with lots of others for retention reasons. But it's not an overnight fix. It is a feeling that some companies do very, very well, and some companies really just keep looking and thinking, oh, I don't know how we're not nailing that.
I've got a really terrifying stat for you, which came out of one of our reports about, I think it was about 6 months ago now, that 50% of people who took a new job last year within tech left due to culture.
Yeah.
So, we're people. You can't fake it till you make it when it comes to culture and creating an environment which fosters people. Like, you feel it, you live it, you breathe it. And I think that's exactly right. The organizations, it's not a tick box exercise, and it certainly is not a tick box exercise when it comes to females. Females have a view, they have a voice, they have a perspective, they bring something different to an organization. And if you think that a tick box of doing something on International Women's Day is going to solve your cultural problems, then you need a serious reality check, because you need to support your workforce. It's as simple as that. And whatever the needs of your workforce is, it's your job to do that. And it's about how you go on a journey with that, but also how you have that open conversation with the workforce itself. You can set up all the initiatives in the world, but actually, fundamentally, if your people aren't bought into the direction of travel you're driving, then it won't work. So I think it's you can tell I just got really passionate on that point. But I just think it's so important. We banned the word inclusivity around like it's sliced bread these days, and the reality is that it takes a lot to create that inclusive culture, and it comes from the people.
Exactly. And most of it, you're so right, it does, that inclusivity is thrown around. And then when it actually comes down to it, that action of doing things and keeping your promises and letting people be flexible and go and do the school run, and we trust you, you're an adult, that you're going to come back and you're still going to work hard, and all of those things. On the first season of this podcast, somebody said to me, it's more than a Slack group. It's not like we've got a Women in Tech Slack group, problem solved. It's far more than that. It's a feeling every day when you do come to work, and when you do need to ask your employer for something, or you have a need, that they actually listen and they actually take action. But I could keep talking to you on this topic, because you can tell we're both very passionate about it. But I wanted to ask you one final thing. If listeners could take away one key message about belonging and imposter syndrome from today's conversation, what would you want it to be?
You are enough, as I said earlier, but your voice is just as valuable as anyone else's, and you deserve to take up the space that you are taking up in tech. I think that is, absolutely pivotal. You are there for all of the right reasons. Whoever you are, and I guess that, you as an individual also lead the path for others to follow. So if you don't start to challenge yourself, those around you won't challenge themselves. And I think we have to pave the way for the future. I think that's really, really important. So be vulnerable, share your story, put yourself out there, challenge yourself. Because when you do that, you will see that others around you will follow, and that in itself will be hugely rewarding. Um, and you are amazing. I think that fundamentally, whoever you are and whoever is listening, you are amazing and you are enough.
Yes, I love that. That is brilliant advice. And even the thought that others follow, when you set that example and when you move into a position where you can set an example, doing things like leaving to do the school run, whether you're a male or a female, that comes from the top down. When you see management doing that, that it's okay to do that, then others will follow. So making sure
Yeah,
that
don't
you're not,
hide it. Don't hide it in the
yeah.
background and pretend you're busy in another meeting or you've got something in your calendar. Be open and honest, because that does pave the way for others, 100%.
Everyone else on the team, exactly. Um, Thank you so much. I could keep talking because we've had another run sheet. I would keep going. But Amanda, thank you so much for taking time out today to talk about imposter syndrome. It's something our community asks us about all the time, and we're also passionate about. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I've absolutely loved it. And equally, just as passionate as your community are around it. And hopefully, there's some positivity that comes out following those that listen to this. So appreciate the time.
Definitely. Thank you. And to everybody listening, as always, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.